Okay? Good idea if I put it around the right way. That's possible. How's that? Yeah? Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
You tap it.
Don't think it's on it.
How's that?
I think
Very good. That better.
That's
That's right.
Technology, we come back to that again later on. We'll see. Let's turn to the Old Testament this morning, the book of Exodus, and chapter 13, at verse 17. Exodus 13 from verse 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road towards the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt armed for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear an oath. He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. After leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and camp near Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. They are to camp by the sea directly opposite Baal Zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. When the king of Egypt was told the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? We've let the Israelites go and have lost their services. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi Hahiroth, opposite Baal Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than die in the desert. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the angel of God, who had been travelling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other, so that neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry land, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. Then you know the story. The Israelites pursued them, and Moses again took the rod and waved it in the air, and the sea fell in on the Egyptians. Then in verse 29, the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. When the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. Let's pray. Lord God, as we approach your word, we ask that your Spirit would come upon us, would open your word to us. Lord, open our hearts as well to hear you speak. In Jesus' name, amen. A businessman in the United States was on holiday in an unknown place of the country to him. But he worked out that he could do some business even when he was on holiday. But he wasn't sure where to find it. This was the days before you could get little devices that could tell you where to go. So he stopped and asked directions. The man giving directions said to him, just drive down this road for about 5 miles and then turn left at the Stop and Go. Stop and Go is a little shop that they have in the States, rather like Spar or the Co-op, something like that. So he set off. He drove 5 miles, and then 6, and then 7, and about 10 miles he stopped again and asked someone else for directions. The man he asked replied, "Well, just go back down this road for about 5 miles and turn right at the Stop and Go." The traveller said, "I've been there. There is no Stop and Go. There's no Spar. There's no nothing." "Oh no," the man said. "It's on a pole. Red light on the top, green light on the bottom. Stop and Go." Don't we all long for direction? To have leadership that takes us forward? Why do birds and animals, fish and whales, find their way in a vast ocean, and we get lost in the next little village? The Arctic tern lives 7 degrees south of the North Pole. But that bird migrates 11,000 miles to Antarctica, and then it returns to 7 degrees south of the North Pole. How does it do that? Polarized light? Navigating by the sun and the stars? Well, maybe for believers it's simply that God gave it the gift of guidance to that fleet of winged birds. What about Atlantic salmon? Birthed in its spawning area, it swims downstream. It journeys 1,000 miles out to sea and comes back to that same tributary stream to spawn again. How do they do that? Sensitive to the slight chemical differences at the mouths of rivers? Or are they guided by God's gift of navigation? We can take 100 tons of metal, put wings on it, punch in some coordinates, and that GPS system will take and guide that plane not only to the right city, but land it as well. And if we can do that to an aeroplane, can not our Creator God do that to his people? What are God's GPS points that he uses to guide us? I suppose there are a number. How does God guide us? Direct intervention. In a sense, a voice from heaven. The past failures and successes by his word. By the presence of the Spirit within us. By our peers. By our conscience. By our prayers and our relationship with him. Well, today I want to look at the Israelites and see how God guided them coming out of the land of Egypt, coming out of captivity. First of all, notice that God guides us with his protection. God guides us by protecting us from the dangers that we've never seen and do not even know exist. Next to the resurrection of the Lord, the Exodus perhaps stands out as one of the greatest expressions of God's power in the Bible. Perhaps as many as 600,000 people, families and animals, maybe 2 million altogether, left Egypt and walked out to their destiny. They not only left Egypt, but Egypt asked them to leave. There were 2 routes to the promised land. But in Exodus 13, verse 17, we learn that God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines, although that was the shortest route. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. The land route, which was called the Via Maris, the way of the sea. The Israelites would have taken, if they'd taken that shortest route, only 5 days to march from Egypt to the promised land. Instead, God sends them round the long way. They trekked along the water of the Suez arm of the Red Sea. That appeared to be a very bad alternative. It would take them years and years to get there. And Moses knew that that was a difficult route. He'd been in Egypt long enough. He knew that the route they were choosing, were being sent, contained nothing to eat or drink. It was wilderness. God's direction for their future began with a detour. Maybe we feel like that sometimes. We feel we've set out, stepped out, what we feel is God's way, and really quickly afterwards, we're not entirely sure. We feel as if perhaps we've taken a detour. We've been abandoned by God. He didn't hear me. Or perhaps I misunderstood him. Didn't hear him correctly. At one of these SeaWorld parks, a 6-year-old absolutely refused to see the show featuring Shamu the killer whale. But he wouldn't tell anyone why. Just didn't want to see it. No amount of discussion could get him to change his mind. Later, when the family got home, they discovered the reason for his reluctance. And Anne had told him how exciting the show would be because they choose children from the audience to feed Shamu. They're 6-year-old, very dangerous. Sometimes we mishear and misunderstand. God guides us to our protection. I'm told that the concept of crisis in Chinese, not that I speak it, the concept of crisis is represented by two words: danger and opportunity. When we manage the crises of our lives, following the example of Jesus, we're able to turn the dangers and disasters of life into opportunities to fulfill the will of God. God guides us by his protection for us. There were enemies that the Israelites were not ready to face when they left Egypt, like the Philistines. When they did encounter a problem, they would be all too keen simply to turn back where they'd come from and felt safe before. Why does God lead us on detours? Sometimes because he knows we can't face the enemies yet. God wants us to protect us from our own inadequacies. Psalm 6 and verses 7 and 8 say, I bless the Lord who guides me. Even at night my heart instructs me. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. Let's not be hasty when God is leading our lives. Just because things aren't getting done quickly enough does not mean that God is not on duty. Maybe God's using that time to protect us from our own foolishness at times. Secondly, God guides us with the memory of past victory. God reminded the Israelites of how he freed them from captivity. When, before they left Egypt, they smeared the blood of the lamb on their doorposts, the angel of death passed over them. In Exodus 12:14, the Lord says to them, you must remember this day forever. Each year you will celebrate it as a special festival to the Lord. Sometimes we need to do that. We need to look back on what the Lord has done for us. When we look back on our lives, we sometimes look back on a long, long road. But often when we do that, we discover God was there in the midst of our pain and suffering. In the summer of 1917, perhaps Scotland's most noted music hall artist travelled down the long, old Roman road across the battlefield of the Somme from the previous year. That road reading from Bapaume to Albert and on to Amiens. He was there to entertain the troops. As he travelled along that road, he stopped at a cemetery opposite the little village which no longer existed, of La Loiselle. There, to spend an entire afternoon at the grave of his only son, John Lauder, who was killed on the 28th of December 1916. Lauder himself got the news of his son's death as he was about to go on stage on the 31st of December in London. He was heartbroken, but he still went on stage that night before returning to Scotland to convey the news to his wife. He never got over his son's loss. It's said that shortly afterwards he wrote a song that would become his signature song in later years. You might know it. carry loader himself singing.
Every road through life is a long, long road filled with joys and sorrows too. And we journey on how your heart may yearn for the things most dear to you. With wealth and love to know, but onward we must go. Keep right on to the end of the road. Keep right on to the end. If the way be long, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. If you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode. Where all you love and you dreaming of will be there at the end of the road.
Sometimes the roads we travel on, when we look back, are long roads. But the lesson can be priceless looking back. What do you think remembering about the parting of the Red Sea did for the faith of the Israelites? Gulf of Suez is 160 miles long and averages 30 miles wide. Its depth ranges from 9 fathoms to 14. But this was the very location the Israelites were rescued from Pharaoh's army. This was where the water was deep enough to cascade in and drown all of Egypt's army. It may seem that the detours of our lives are deeper than normal, but God brings out of them a powerful victory. Don't stop when the way gets tough. Keep walking, and you'll see the glory of God revealed. The people were fed in that desert, fed manna in the wilderness. When David, much later, was confronted by the giant Goliath, he was not afraid. And he tells us why he was not afraid. In 1 Samuel, chapter 17, verse 33, Saul says to him, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy." And he's been fighting since his youth. But David said to Saul, "Your servant's been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Memory of past victories will give us future courage and faithfulness. And we need to do that in this church as much as any other. Our present situation is based on what happened in the past. People in the past here and in the area more widely have seen wonderful things of God. People were given that building across the road as a church. It was just an empty shell. It took effort, hard labour, and trust in God to complete that. But it's not only 35 years ago. We go back to the foundations of work in Glenrothes Church in the 1950s and Leslie in the 1880s. Tremendous work there based on faith when a 16-year-old lad God spoke to and asked him to go out and to witness to people in the area. And that he did. When God called upon him and the few people he gathered round him to build the church building that still stands in Leslie, it was opened within 3 or 4 years. Yet, God is at work with us. Looking back on past victories should encourage us in our faith and our work for him today. Can we trust God to be on our side? The little passenger cruiser was wrecked in a furious storm, and the only survivor was a little boy who was swept by the waves onto a rock. He sat there all night long until the next morning he was spotted and rescued. And he was asked, "Did you tremble while you were on the rock during the night?" "Yes," he said, "I trembled all night, but the rock didn't." You know, our God is an awesome God. He doesn't tremble in a storm. Finally, God guides us by his supernatural direction. Guides us down that long road to develop trust. The Israelites hadn't gone through the wilderness, they wouldn't have seen the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. They hadn't gone the long road, they would not have experienced the miraculous crossing of that sea. Before you curse God because of your circumstances, consider that he might know a little more than you do about your circumstances. That's true of all of us, me as well. How many times do we rail against God? Why am I in this situation? Well, maybe he knows a little bit better what's going to happen. Story is told of a king in Africa who had a close friend who looked at every situation, whether it was positive or negative, by remarking, "This is good." One day the king and his friends were out hunting. Well, the friend had the job of loading and preparing the guns for the king. Apparently he loaded the gun in the wrong way, and when the king fired it, it blew off the king's thumb. The friend remarked as usual, "This is good." The king didn't agree. The king replied, "No, this is not good," and he sent his friend to jail. About a year later, the king was hunting in an unknown area, and cannibal tribes captured him. They tied his hands, stacked some wood, set a steak to cook him, but as they did, they noticed the king's thumb was missing. Being superstitious, they never ate anyone who was less than whole. So they freed him and sent him on his way. Well, on his way home, the king remembered how he'd lost his thumb and the fact that he put his friend in jail. He went to jail and he said, "You were right. It was good that my thumb was blown off. I'm very sorry for sending you to jail." No, his friend replied, "This is good." "What do you mean, this is good?" His friend replied, "If I'd not been in jail, I would have been with you." But it is good, whatever the situation. Paul writes to the Romans in chapter 8, verse 28, "We know that in all things God works for good for those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose." God gives us supernatural direction to guide us, to develop our own maturity. God is more interested in the character of the Israelites than their arrival. And he's more interested in our character than in our accomplishments. It took 40 years of supernatural guidance for God to build the character he wanted in the Israelites, to get them ready to lean on God's promises, to fight the battles to come. We, naturally, don't want pain or trouble. We don't want to have to study and to burn midnight oil. But God uses circumstances to guide us and correct us and lead us. The great evangelist of the 19th century, Charles Spurgeon, once said, "I dare say the greatest earthly blessing that God can give to any of us is health, with the exception of sickness." How can someone who's lost a loved one, a best friend, say, "My God shall supply all my needs according to his riches and glory"? Can someone who's going through the pain of divorce say, "I still have joy"? And yet, we still hear people who have terrible diseases like multiple sclerosis, cancers, heart conditions, those who have broken dreams, made foolish mistakes, can still sing, "This is my story. This is my song, praising my Saviour all the day long." Paul again to the Romans. What can we say then about all of this? If God is for us, who can be against us? The one who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, surely he will give us all things along with him. So what can we learn from the Israelites? That God will not give his guidance until we need it. So everyone around us will know that it was God's guidance. You know, we can struggle here at Collydean as we face the future. It's been recorded a couple of weeks ago. What kind of things is God leading us into? Just in this past week, a number of leaders in the church gathered together with some from other churches, shared ideas about how God was taking us forward. Some of those things we'll share with you over the next number of weeks. But trying to work out where God is guiding us is not an easy thing. We can struggle with it. Will it be easy? No. But remember, that work didn't begin just a couple of weeks ago or even a couple of years ago. Our journey began when the first Christians, going back centuries now, came to this area and decided, in the case of this place, we needed to do a ministry right here. We need to trust in God's supernatural power to weigh our potential, our incomes, our needs, and to trust in him, to see his miracle happen. God was there in the past to protect us. He's here in the present to empower us. And he will be here in the future to encourage and to complete us. Can God guide us today? Yes. Can he guide us for tomorrow? Yes. He can. He does, and he will. So let us entrust the future, this church here, and each one of us within it, to God and to his guidance for us. Let's pray together. Father God, we confess so often, both as a church, as groups of churches, and as individuals, that we struggle with how you guide us and lead us forward. So often for us, it seems something of a dark void. Yet, Lord, we acknowledge that you do lead us. Sometimes to us that is mystifying. Yet when we look back, we see how good you have been to us. So Lord, we commit ourselves afresh into your hands. And we ask, Lord, that you would lead us gently by your Spirit into all that you have for us. And we thank you for all that that will bring to our lives and to a fellowship of you people together. We acknowledge that there will be times when it's not easy. But we thank you that you are our rock and that you will stand firm beside us. Accept our thanks and our praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Just as a response, to finish that singing, I guide you all that way over. And then I've got to share some copy